First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. Got a very controversial topic to discuss. We're going to be talking about transgender inmates and basically the complication when it comes to housing transgenders. This is a very complicated topic to discuss. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. I also bring on two other experts, Russ Hamilton and Gary York. So each one of us is going to provide a perspective. And the reason why we're going to discuss it right now is because we have a hot topic going on in Illinois. An inmate by the name of Dion Hampton, a.k.a. Strawberry, is a transgender who is now going to be housed in a female facility. He was housed at a male facility, and now he is going to be housed at a female facility. And I think that this move, as complicated as may be, some people are not realizing why this move is coming into play. So we're going to provide a different perspective, hopefully give you guys an understanding of why this move is happening. And either way, just try to give you guys a general understanding of how complicated it is when it comes to dealing with transgender inmates. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work that front line. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. I stand by for our sponsors.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. This is a very complicated topic because when we talk about transgenders, sometimes most of us feel that we're walking on thin ice. We have to stop feeling that. Because if we keep on feeling that we're walking on thin ice, we're never going to be effective. Sometimes we're going to do things that are going to make that ice crack. But sometimes that's needed. That's needed to get the job done. Now, PREA gives us policies and procedures that are meant to protect vulnerable inmates. In this case here, they specify vulnerable inmates as transgenders or homosexuals. But there's a lot of inmates that could be considered vulnerable, including inmates that are target of gangs, sexual predators could be considered vulnerable. I'm talking about their crime on the street, them coming into the facility, being considered vulnerable. Female inmates, when you're housing male inmates among them, can also be considered vulnerable. So again, it all depends on the context of the situation. So we can't just say that this one group is vulnerable and automatically say, well, that's the only vulnerable group. We take the concerns of all inmates in regards to their safety and security. So it doesn't matter if they fall into one group or not. If there's a safety or security issue, we take their concerns very seriously. Very seriously. Now, when it comes to transgenders, we have to know that they identify as a transgender. And that's where they have to be honest when they come into the system, right on intake. Because they're going to be asked that question, do you identify as a male or a female? And they have to answer that honestly because that's where their progression goes from there. Once they get into that facility, that's a question that they're going to be asked, and they have to answer that honestly. Don't get me wrong, it can be discovered later on whether they decide to do it through mental health, medical, social services. There can be many routes that they could take in order to say, hey, you know what? I didn't say this right the first time, second time around. Yeah, you know what? I want to admit I identify as a female or I identify as a male, depending on what facility you're at. Because it's funny, when we have all these discussions, no one's talking about bringing female inmates who identify as males into male facilities. So it's just a little bit of a different perspective. But anyway, once they let it be known that they are transgenders, then we have to go ahead and accommodate that, which includes classifying them or seeing them at least twice a year on classification and making sure that we identify their concerns and act if those concerns are needed, that we have to listen to their perspective. But again, we would have to do that to any inmate that has a safety or security concern. We wouldn't just limit it to that one population because sometimes it's the transgenders that could be the aggressors. We also have to be concerned of the inmates who use this status to manipulate moves, manipulate anything that has some form of selfish gain. Because again, once the spotlight is on them, they may choose to say, well, you know what? If I say this, this, and this is going to force the facility to react. That's why we need fail-safes. We need something in our hands to say, hey, if you manipulate this policy, now remember, this policy is built to protect and serve. So if you manipulate it, you're taking away our ability to protect and serve. There should be some form of punishment, some form of zero tolerance that shows that you better not do that again. Because either way, the people that are making these laws, these policies and procedures, they should be talking to the front line so the front line can say, hey, these are great. We respect that. But we also have to be aware of the people that are going to manipulate those laws for their own gain. For example, Illinois could open up a floodgate right now, letting in a transgender into a female facility. Sure, they may identify as a female, but there could be many inmates that may come out of the woodwork that may be able to fake that funk and then find their way into a female facility. That's why when we make moves like this, we have to make sure that move is specific and unique. We have to make sure that it cannot easily be duplicated by someone else, especially those reasonings behind it. Because if those reasonings can be duplicated, then anybody can go ahead and say, hey, I want to be moved now. This is my case. This is my scenario. So each case, when something like that is done, has to be looked at as a case-by-case basis. And then again, the decisions are made based on how unique the circumstances are. But we always have to be aware of what precedents we set forward. We open up that door, it could be a flood of concerns that are going to wind up coming through. That's why what Illinois did may solve a problem immediately, but what's the ripple effect? What's the ripple effect? What's going to happen in the future? How many other people are going to come up and say, hey, I need to be housed in a female facility? And out of those people that are coming up, how many are really transgender inmates? What about the inmates that aren't transgender but are homosexual? Well, they feel that, hey, it would be better for me to house with female inmates. We don't know. Also, we can't isolate them either. So we have to make sure that however we house them in accordance with how we would house any other inmate that is eligible for housing in general population. But again, it's a real big concern. It's something that should not be taken lightly. And every decision that we make right now, they're kind of like pioneer decisions. So we have to be aware of, if I make this decision now, what's going to be the outcome later on? Because this may not just involve this individual person. It could involve others who may try to utilize that same route. And that's going to be a growing concern as we begin to move forward. And again, just going back to people that may manipulate this, because I believe that PREA works as long as it's not being misused. I believe it helps us get the resources needed to protect those who need our protection. But again, not just limited to transgender inmates or homosexual inmates, just being able to protect the inmates in general who need our protection. So I agree, it is a needed resource as long as it's not misused. But the other concern is when it comes to housing transgender inmates is, again, how they now can misuse these policies and procedures that are meant to protect. If you house them with an inmate that they don't want to be housed with, they can quickly falsify PREA complaints. And now we have to scramble to create moves that really the PREA complaint is either unsubstantiated or unfounded. But at the end of the day, we have to act as if it's a real complaint, because we talked about the boy that cries wolf. We have to act each time that boy cries wolf. So we can't afford to not act. And they know that. So that's a good way that they can manipulate housing and wind up with someone they want to be with, which could turn out to be a whole nother concern. But again, these are just my thoughts. There's a lot here to discuss. One day I'm going to have an open dialogue, put some good people on this discussion, and really just have a free flow, just to see where we're at. But I think that this is something that has to be discussed. We can't always pretend that we have to be walking on thin ice. If we're going to be effective in this, we cannot be afraid to step on that ice, and if it cracks, it cracks. Because again, we need to be effective. And sometimes that requires us to go in areas we've never been before. What's your thoughts, Russ?
Hi, everyone. So, anyway, Anthony Gangi asked me to make a quick short video on some stuff that's been going on up in Illinois Department of Corrections. And there was a story released where there was a transgender inmate who was transitioning from male to female, and she had alleged that there were some sexual harassment issues and actually sexual abuse issues going on, and was trying to use that as a springboard to get transferred to a women's facility, even though she still apparently had a functioning penis. So, with that being said, in the court case, the judge ordered all of the Illinois Department of Corrections to go through transgender training. And a lot of the headlines and stuff had inferred that this judge had actually ordered the Illinois Department of Corrections to send her to a female facility. Now, I found some things online where apparently that was not the case. But in getting down to the brass tacks of this thing, and just saying what I feel the real issue is that the Illinois Department of Corrections simply caved to political correctness. And this judge, regardless of whether he ordered this or not, was instrumental in having that happen. And part of the thing that happens when we simply abandon the law and abandon policy and procedure is we just get people that are willing to manipulate the system. And in this case, this inmate did it simply by being offended enough and making enough allegations to get what that particular individual wanted. And it was simple and as clear cut as that. Now, in the big picture, in the big scope of things and stuff, we have an affirmative duty to protect inmates. We have an affirmative duty to protect that particular inmate, but also the inmates that she is around. So when you transfer her to a women's facility, there's a huge liability with regards to what might happen there, but not just from how she might abuse other female inmates, but how other female inmates might abuse her. And all of this centers around political correctness, because we've gotten to where we cater to people who are offended, and they use that offense to manipulate, to guilt people, and to get the system to do things that the system was not designed to do. The system is supposed to follow the law. The system is supposed to follow procedure. The system is supposed to follow policy on the matter, not to make it up because someone's offended or we feel like we should be catering to someone. We should be following the law. So, taking a step back from that, when you look at who the experts are with regard to security, who is that? Who are the experts? It's not the judge. It's not that inmate. It's certainly not that inmate's lawyers. The real, true experts on security is us. The people that work behind the walls, the people that understand how the system works, the people that understand how the system works behind the scenes, right? We're the ones that can make things happen. We're the ones that can make things safe for particular individuals, for particular sets of individuals, for particular subsets of individuals. We know how to do that. Instead, it appears to me that the Illinois Department of Corrections just caved and was trying to make everyone shut up about the whole thing. Now, I could be wrong about that because, let's face it, the media doesn't do a good job at all about presenting what the facts are. They never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So it's possible. I'm willing to concede that I may not have a clear picture of what the Illinois Department of Corrections is really going through. But I think it's pretty safe to say that there is a degree to which they're catering, pandering, and being manipulated by this inmate. What should be happening is we, the experts, should be taking charge, and we should be devising policy and stuff, changing it if necessary, and figuring out ways to keep those inmates there at that female facility safe, ways to keep this particular inmate safe, because there are allegations being made and stuff, and ways to get to the bottom of it all, and not letting all the hoopla and letting, all of the allegations and all of the political correctness, oh no, we can't offend anybody, we have to make sure we use the right pronouns, and we have to make sure that we cater to them and make sure that, we're not going to offend them in any way. It's not about offending or not offending anyone. It's about safety. It's about security. It's about applying the law. It's about applying policy. It's about applying procedure. That's all that there really is to it. Get political correctness out of the way. Let the experts in corrections make the decisions. This judge, he should be going back to them and saying, hey, you guys are the experts. Figure it out. Come up with a plan. Bring it back to me. Not arbitrarily ordering something. So whether he ordered it or not, whether or not Illinois Department of Corrections caved, not the issue. You should be taking the lead, not running at it from the back and hoping that everything works out for the best. So anyway, I want to thank Anthony for giving me this chance to get outside my comfort zone and address something that I probably really would rather not, but makes me grow, and I hope everyone likes this. I hope I get some good feedback and input from it. I hope that I addressed it in ways that people think, you're doing right, or also let me know if I'm doing wrong. Regardless, I want all my brothers and sisters in corrections out there to stay safe, have a great New Year's weekend coming up here, and I'll see you later.
Hello everyone, I'm Gary York. I'm retired after 28 and a half years corrections in Florida, and 12 of those years as a Florida senior prison investigator investigating crimes within the Florida prison system. I was asked today to give just a couple of minutes about transgender inmates and some of the issues that we have to deal with involving them. And since I was a prison inspector for 12 years, I'm going to talk about the transgender inmates from the investigative side and the problems that they have caused across the country with more lawsuits, more taxpayers' money for courts, and obviously more prison investigations. Because now with the transgender inmate issue, we are conducting many more of this type of investigation where a transgender inmate is alleging abuse or rape in a prison, and we must investigate that. And we are also investigating transgender inmates attacking other inmates. And we have had transgender assaults on our prison staff on the front line, the people who have to deal with the transgender inmates and all the other inmates on a day-to-day basis. Definitely the toughest job of this whole thing we're going to talk about. One thing we know from studies, approximately 10%, there's a 10% higher risk of transgender inmates being harmed by other inmates. And, you have a male transferring over to a female, and we don't know how far along they are, and we have other male inmates raping them and assaulting them. Yes, that's going to happen. That's why it's our job to classify them correctly, place them in a safe environment, and we must make sure they don't get harmed. Now, on the other hand, don't think that all transgender inmates are the victims, because many times they are not the victims. Many times the transgender inmates we have found are the ones stirring the pot, shaking it up, if I may, and then getting into a fight with another inmate or assaulting another inmate themselves and crying, I'm defending myself, look at me. So, there's a lot of things and variables with transgender inmates when it comes to prison incidents that have to be investigated that we have to try to look at and see through. Not everything is always as it seems, as they say, and that's the truth in many of these investigations with transgender inmates. But we must be fair and impartial, just like the prison management has to be fair and impartial when classifying and placing transgender inmates, and the correctional officers on the front line have to be fair and impartial and provide care, custody, and control. It's tough, folks, with all the other things we already have going on, but it's not going to get better for a while until our federal and state and institutional rules can all come to a common place and agree on doing the same thing and classifying and working together. We also know that when we have to investigate a case with a transgender being assaulted or committing the assault or being raped or whatever the case may be, it's got many, many more variables than just going in and investigating Johnny hit Joe in the head and Joe hit Johnny in the stomach, and now we have aggravated battery, who wants to prosecute who. It's just not that simple, because transgenders are known to do a lot of complaints against management and going to court and wanting to sue for indifference, deliberate indifference. They like to say, I was treated differently, and if that's the case, then it's all going to come out in the wash. But if not, then they will not win their deliberate indifference case. So what we're going to look for when we go to the prison is, did the prison officials assess the transgender inmates on a case-by-case basis, each one separately, with a council or a committee? Okay, because everyone is different, just like every inmate is different, just like every person is different. So did they do a case-by-case? And was this inmate a separate case study? We know transgender inmates obviously have a gender identity that is different from what they were born with. So did the agency start out with their original biological sex and use that as an initial assessment? There's nothing wrong with that. But did they use that as an initial and then look further to see if the gender identity has progressed? In other words, was the inmate based on self-identified gender? Did the agency look to see how the progress was going towards the gender transition? Did the agency use medical records, maybe mental health records, behavioral issues, past history of this inmate? And did the agency, most of all and above all, make sure and look after the health and safety of this transgender inmate? And folks, if that's all covered, let the inmate sue the agency, but they probably won't win. Just cover all your bases, from the management right down to the frontline officer. Frontline officers, don't let the transgender inmates get you in a trap, trick you into putting you in another cell or a wrong cell. Don't be manipulated by a transgender inmate, just the same as any other inmate. Follow the rules and you will be safe. Was the transgender inmate misclassified would be the final thing we would look for, okay? After all that is done, now we can actually start our criminal investigation on the rape or the assault. Now, with a regular inmate, we would do some of the same things. We would look to see if they were classified correctly, in the right place, where they were supposed to be. But it's much more complicated with transgender inmates. And just to let you know, this isn't new. 20 years ago, and I'll use my paper to make sure I get it right, a trans woman named Dee Farmer won a Supreme Court case that allowed people to sue prisons for deliberate indifference. And that's what a lot of the transgender inmates are trying to use now. Now, the good news is they're not winning a lot of these cases. 4 years ago, Orange County Jail in Florida had a big deliberate indifference case against them, and it was ruled in favor of the agency. Why? Because all those things I read before were in line. Everything was done properly. So the main thing that happened 20 years ago is the prison, a prison dominated with male inmates is where apparently Dee Farmer was placed, and she won that case, but that was 20 years ago, and there's been far and few in between. So the prison can be found liable for not keeping transgender inmates safe, but let's don't let that happen. Let's keep all our ducks in a row. Let's not be manipulated by them. And management, if you do everything the way you're supposed to, I know there's a big debate now that the federal rules for transgender are differentiating somewhat with our PREA. There's things we have to do in PREA that don't match up with the federal transgender rules, but you know what? We're going to have to iron all that out because we want to have all our ducks in a row, and we don't want to be held liable in a civil courtroom or a criminal courtroom for that matter. So it's not easy, but it will get better, I promise. The rough waters will calm as soon as we generate and deal with this more. But it'll be a while. Thank you for the time. Gary York.